Hello everyone, I am Sana and welcome to today's lecture, which is Stimulus Control and Relapse Prevention. The objectives of today's topic are: the first is overview of stimulus control, second is simple stimulus control, third is stimulus control in intermittent and daily smokers, fourth is stimulus control and insomnia, fifth is relapse prevention, and sixth is immediate determinants of relapse, seventh and the last objective is covert antecedents of high-risk situations. Let us begin with an overview of stimulus control. A person's immediate environment, which is filled with auditory, visual, tactile, olfactory and gustatory inputs, has an impact on their operant behavior. Due to their intensity or contrast with other stimuli, some of these stimuli are more salient than others. Although salient stimuli are more likely to affect behavior, the person's history with the stimuli also plays a critical role in deciding how they work. When responding is influenced by antecedent stimuli that have been linked to the availability of operant reinforcement and have so come to indicate that specific responses are more likely to be reinforced, this is known as stimulus control. Respondent conditioning differentiates between the effects of unconditioned and conditioned stimuli on behavior and distinguishes between the regulation of operant behavior by motivational operations and discriminative stimulus control. An open sign in a restaurant is an illustration of stimuli control. The illuminated sign informs a hungry person that approaching the entrance will result in the intended outcome of entering the establishment. The dimmed sign will make the potential customer look elsewhere. This finding is a result of the person's past experiences eating in restaurants, while the open sign is lit either directly or indirectly. Similarly to this, a child may ask for candy when certain family members are there. When the child's grandparents are present, they are more likely to grant requests for candy if they have in the past been more likely to do so than the child's parents. In these instances, the illuminated sign and the grandparents' presence act as a discriminative stimuli, indicating that reinforcement is available for a specific response. In contrast, the dimmed sign and the parent's presence act as S-deltas, cues that indicate that a certain response won't receive reinforcement. Stimulus control can also be established by removing or avoiding unpleasant or less desirable stimuli, that is, negative reinforcement. Usually, kids learn not to touch the stove when the stove light is on and not to cross the street when the light is red. Sometimes these stimuli acquire their effects as a result of actual encounters with the resulting consequences, for example, burned fingers. As an alternative, observational learning or learning of rules can be used to build discriminative control. Both scenarios could have a similar impact on behavior. Since stimulus control is one of the fundamental behavioral mechanisms, it applies to all facets of human behavior. Discriminatory inputs have an impact on when and how we connect with others in social behavior. For instance, when we approach someone, we are more inclined to engage in a discussion with them than we are with someone who appears to be preoccupied. Depending on a person's attire or other symbols, we interact with them differently, for example, uniforms. Different indications that denote danger and safety guide our actions on a daily basis, for example, warning labels and traffic signs. The environment's visual cues and other people's verbal cues influence our language, influencing both what we say and how we say it. Let us now talk about simple stimulus control. When behavior varies depending on whether a stimulus is present or not, stimulus control is established. By repeatedly rewarding a response in the presence of a stimulus but not in its absence, or alternatively In its absence, but not in its presence in the operant laboratory, stimulus control can be created. When changes in response rates are prompted by the presentation and removal of the stimulus, stimulus control is then demonstrated. A pigeon may get grain for pecking a response key when it is lit blue, but not when it is lit yellow, for example, as a result of two separate cues signaling reinforcement and non-reinforcement. After that, a higher reaction rate in the presence of the blue key light demonstrates stimulus discrimination, which is demonstrated when a child acts differently in the sight of one parent compared to the other. Instead of merely pitting reinforcement versus non-reinforcement, the response may be rewarded according to the various reinforcement schedules while being subjected to various stimuli, leading to stimulus control over different time patterns of responding. Discrimination training refers to the processes used to establish stimulus discrimination. Only one stimulus is present at a time during successive discrimination training, and the individual is exposed to the results of reacting to it for a while before it is changed out for another. A multiple reinforcement schedule is characterized by the continuous alternation of stimuli linked to various reinforcement schedules. In training for simultaneous discrimination, two or more stimuli are displayed at once and distinct outcomes accompany responses to each stimulus, similar to how a pigeon will earn food for pecking a blue response key but not a yellow response key that is also present at the same time. The pigeon's subsequent decision to not only answer on the blue key simulates, for instance, a youngster who consistently goes to the same parent with a request while both parents are there. In practical contexts, prompting and the transfer of stimulus control techniques are frequently used for differential reinforcement to develop stimulus control. When stimulus control is established, stimulus generalization can be observed to occur in response to novel stimuli that physically resemble the training stimulus. For example, a child who learns to name a cheetah in a picture book now correctly recognizes the animal in other pictures and may extend that response incorrectly to other big cats. In part, the degree of similarity between the training stimulus and the novel stimulus determines the extent of generalized control and the range of stimuli to which control generalizes. As a result, stimulus control is not exclusively limited to the stimuli used for discriminating training. A discriminative stimulus class is a set of stimuli that, due to their physical similarity to the training stimulus, regulate the same response. If two stimuli are functionally similar in some sense, despite being physically different, they can end up controlling the same reaction, that is, a functional stimulus class. For instance, because of their sheer ability to be worn, socks and an overcoat could both influence the response clothing. The stimuli connected with various response outcomes in simple laboratory preparations frequently vary from one another along a single stimulus dimension, for example, the wavelength of light. However, the stimulus control is a little more complicated in the natural environment. Apples and oranges differ from one another in shape, color, texture, taste, and smell in the real world, and one person can be distinguished from another based on a variety of characteristics of their attitude and appearance. Compound stimuli, such as the simultaneous presentation of various stimuli like a tone and a light or visual stimuli that differ from one another in both shape and color, are used in the lab to simulate control by multiple features of a stimulus. Individual components of a compound stimulus that controls behavior are frequently also able to do so on their own when they are delivered. As a result, even while we may first learn to distinguish between apples and oranges, when all of their many characteristics are available, we might later be able to recognize these fruits solely by their taste or their shape. However, there are situations when a response that is reinforced in the presence of a compound stimulus is later determined to only be under the control of one of its components. In blocking, a stimulus with a prior history of reinforcement dominates over a novel stimulus, and in overshadowing, the more salient stimulus dominates. When a child appears to have learned to recognize sight words using flashcards that have both printed words and pictures, but later struggles to do so when the visuals are missing, cue competition may be at work. The creation of stimulus control is demonstrated through respondent or Pavlovian conditioning, in which an originally neutral stimulus develops into a conditioned response as a result of indicating the approaching presentation of an appetitive or an unpleasant stimulus. The main aspect in which it is different from operant discrimination training is that there is no requirement for the subjects to react in any way to the training stimuli. In respondent procedures, factors that affect stimulus control and generalization in operant procedures typically also do so. Let us now discuss stimulus control in intermittent and daily smokers. It is believed that nicotine dependence is the main factor influencing continued cigarette use. This explains why most smokers smoke regularly throughout the day, every day. This keeps their blood levels of nicotine from dropping too low, which would cause nicotine withdrawal. Although smoking at extremely regular intervals is the most effective way to maintain nicotine levels, referred to as trough maintenance, other models allow for deviations from this, such as smoking in reaction to environmental signals. However, due to the fact that nicotine withdrawal can begin a few hours after quitting, this margin of safety is only temporary. Now, the question arises, what might account intermittent smokers' difficulty in quitting? Control of the stimulus may be a factor. When the presence of a certain stimulus or a set of stimuli modifies the likelihood that a behavior will occur, such as smoking, it is said that the behavior is under stimulus control. These relationships are thought to be made through a variety of learning mechanisms. Stimuli may have an impact on smoking by acting as discriminative stimuli that indicate smoking will be reinforcing as priming stimuli, as conditioned stimuli that elicit responses based on prior associations with stimuli, including the effects of smoking itself, or as conditioned stimuli that act as a stimuli. If particular situational cues are strongly linked to intermittent smokers smoking, then being exposed to those cues could encourage continuing smoking and can be a considerable obstacle to quitting in the face of exposure to those cues. Strong stimulus control is a common trait of casual drug use, and it has been hypothesized that its reduction is an important step in the development of tobacco dependence as use shifts from specific settings to nicotine maintenance through frequent nicotine intake. This is supported by the fact that respondents to an intermittent smokers questionnaire on a scale measuring smoking motives identify responsiveness to cues as their primary driving force for smoking, and that smoking in chippers or very light smokers is demonstrated to be more responsive to stimuli than in heavy smokers. Ecological momentary assessment, which compiles real-time, in-the-moment data over a number of occasions, is a beneficial tool for analyzing a person's smoking habits. Ecological validity is ensured by gathering data in the respondents' actual environments. while recall bias issues are avoided by gathering data at the moment. The associations between smoking and situational antecedents can be described by gathering information on both smoking and non-smoking occasions. Numerous populations have been studied using this technique to examine situational connections with smoking. To measure stimulus control, one must abstract from associations between smoking and cues that intermittent smokers or daily smokers share in general and look at idiographic associations with cues within each individual, because these associations can be idiosyncratic, with different smokers even responding in different, sometimes opposing ways to the same cue. For instance, even while mood exerts stimulus control over smoking for both groups of subjects, if some subjects smoke when they are feeling good while others smoke when they are feeling terrible, a group-wise examination of individual moods may not reveal any influence. Indeed, data from an ecological momentary assessment study of daily smokers revealed such effects, with the overall group-wise relationship between smoking and mood estimated to be 0. However, the distribution displayed significant variation, with relationships pointing in both directions, and these variations were useful in predicting subsequent relapse. Additionally, even within a specific domain, different participants may react differently to the same stimuli. For instance, some participants might react based on how they feel, while others would react based on how stimulated they feel. Both may be viewed as similarly responsive to stimulus control by mood, but associations would also be overlooked or diminished in the usual analysis of single cues. However, given that each person has a unique learning history, it is reasonable to anticipate that there will be a wide range of idiographic connections between smoking and antecedent stimuli. This is especially true if conditioning is to account for the associations. Coming to another objective, which is stimulus control and insomnia. The use of stimulus control instructions as a behavioral treatment for insomnia was invented by Bootsin. The purpose of this set of instructions is to assist the patient with insomnia in developing a regular sleep-wake cycle, enhancing the bed and bedroom as cues for sleep, and decreasing them as indications for activities that can disrupt sleep. When to go to sleep, what activities are allowed or prohibited while in bed, what to do if sleep is not attained within a reasonable amount of time, when to get up in the morning, and daytime naps are all covered in the stimulus control instructions as described by Bootsin. The origin of stimulus control therapy can be found in the operant learning analysis, which views falling asleep as a proactive action meant to produce reinforcement, that is sleep. For the occurrence of reinforcement, sleep-related stimuli are transformed into discriminative stimuli. Inadequate stimuli regulation may be the cause of the problems getting to sleep, staying asleep, or falling asleep again after awakening. The classical conditioning goals are to eliminate the association of insomnia with the bedroom, whereas the operant conditioning goals of stimulus control are to reinforce sleep-compatible associations with the bed and bedroom surroundings and to eliminate sleep-incompatible ones. The stimulus control instructions restore the bedroom and bed as strong cues for sleep while reducing the bedroom and bed as indications for arousal. They also encourage a more regular circadian cycle of sleep and wakefulness. Additionally, it's important to warn patients against clock watching, a behavior that promotes wakefulness. Instead, if a patient feels that 15 to 20 minutes have gone after retiring without sleeping, they should get out of bed. One benefit of this information is that patients gain a better understanding of the symptoms that indicates true sleepiness as opposed to just weariness such as yawning, tired eyes, difficulty keeping one's eyes open, and nodding off. Let us now talk about one more objective, which is relapse prevention. The relapse prevention model developed by Marlatt and Gordon is based on social cognitive psychology and includes a conceptual model for relapse as well as a number of cognitive and behavioral techniques for avoiding or minimizing relapse episodes. The model's comprehensive taxonomy of the variables or circumstances that can cause or contribute to relapse episodes is one of its key features. The relapse prevention model proposes that those same variables can be divided into two groups: covert antecedents and immediate determinants, such as high-risk situations, a person's coping mechanisms, result expectations, and the abstinence violation effect, lifestyle imbalances, and urges and cravings. Assessment of the environmental and emotional aspects of circumstances that may be connected to relapse is the first step in treatment methods based on the relapse prevention model, that is high-risk situation. The therapist then analyzes the individual drinker's responses to these scenarios as they move forward after identifying those features. They also look backward to examine the lifestyle variables that increase the drinker's exposure to high-risk situations. The therapist then creates methods to target deficits in the client's cognitive and behavioral repertoire and so lower the likelihood of relapse based on this comprehensive examination of the relapse process. We shall now talk about the immediate determinants of relapse. First one is high-risk situations. The relapse prevention model's central aspect asserts that high-risk circumstances frequently act as the initial triggers of alcohol use after abstinence. The model proposes that a person who has started a behavior change, such as quitting drinking, should experience a boost in self-efficacy or mastery over his or her behavior, which should grow as a person maintains the change. However, some circumstances or occurrences have the potential to undermine a person's sense of control and, as a result, trigger relapse crisis. Marlatt classified the emotional, environmental, and interpersonal aspects of the relapse-inducing circumstances as described by study participants using research on the precipitants of relapse in alcoholics who had undergone inpatient treatment. This taxonomy suggests that a variety of circumstances, including the following, can contribute to relapse episodes. Number one is the highest rate of relapse is linked to negative emotional states like anger, anxiety, sadness, boredom, and annoyance, which are also known as intrapersonal high-risk situations. These emotional states may be mainly the result of intrapersonal perceptions of specific circumstances such as feeling bored or lonely after returning from work to an empty house or responses to environmental events, for example, feeling angry about an impending layoff at work. Number two is negative emotions are also produced and can lead to relapse in scenarios that include a person or group of individuals, that is, interpersonal high-risk situations, particularly interpersonal conflict, for instance, a disagreement with a family member. In fact, Marlatt's investigation found that more than half of all relapse episodes were triggered by intrapersonal negative emotional states and interpersonal conflict situations. Third is, in Marlatt's study, social pressure, which includes both direct, Verbal or non-verbal persuasion and indirect pressure, for example, being near other drinkers, was a factor in more than 20% of relapse episodes. Number 4 is celebrations, exposure to alcohol-related stimuli or cues such as passing by one's favorite bar or seeing an advertisement for an alcoholic beverage, testing one's self-control, that is using willpower to limit consumption, and general cravings were also noted as high-risk situations that could cause relapse. Cravings that are general in nature were also noted as high-risk scenarios that can lead to relapse. Second immediate determinant of relapse is coping. Although the relapse prevention model views the high-risk event as the instant relapse trigger, the individual's response to the circumstance ultimately determines whether they will go through a lapse, that is, begin using alcohol. A crucial factor in predicting the outcome is how someone responds in a high-risk situation. As a result, someone who has the ability to use effective coping mechanisms such as behavioral ones like leaving the situation or cognitive ones like using positive self-talk is less likely to relapse than someone who does not have those abilities. Additionally, it is believed that those who have dealt effectively with high-risk circumstances have a greater sense of self-efficacy, that is, a personal perception of mastery over the specific risky situations. Conversely, those of us with low self-efficacy believe we lack the will or willpower to abstain from alcohol in high-risk situations. Third is outcome expectancies. According to studies conducted on college students, those who drink more frequently tend to have higher expectations for the positive effects of alcohol, also known as outcome expectancies, and may easily imagine only the immediate positive effects while dismissing or ignoring the potential negative effects of binge drinking. When a person anticipates using alcohol to help him or her cope with unpleasant feelings or conflict, that is, when drinking serves as self-medication, such positive outcome expectancies may become especially salient in high-risk scenarios. In these situations, the drinker primarily concentrates on the expectation of the immediate gratification such as stress relief and ignores potential delayed negative consequences. Fourth is the abstinence violation effect. There is a significant distinction between the first violation of the abstinence goal, that is, an initial lapse, and a return to disordered drinking or abandonment of the abstinence goal, that is, a full-blown relapse. The progression from lapse to relapse is not always unavoidable, even while research on a variety of addictive behaviors has shown that a lapse significantly raises the chance of an eventual relapse. The abstinence violation effect, which Marlatt and Gordon described, is a form of response by the drinker to a lapse that may affect whether lapse results in a relapse. This response focuses on the drinker's emotional reaction to an initial lapse and the reasons why they believe it occurred. People who blame themselves for the mistake are more likely to feel guilty and have other unfavorable emotions which may encourage them to drink more in an effort to lessen or eliminate their feelings of failure or regret. In addition, individuals who attribute the lapse to constant, general internal factors outside of their control, such as "I lack willpower and will never be able to stop drinking," are more likely to give up on the abstinence attempt and experience a full-blown relapse than individuals who attribute the lapse to their inability to cope successfully with a particularly high-risk situation. As opposed to the first group, the second group understands the need to learn from one's mistakes, and as a result, they might come up with more sensible strategies to deal with future trigger situations. Now, let us discuss the last objective of today's lecture, which is covert antecedents of high-risk situations. A number of less evident factors also have an impact on the relapse process, even while high-risk circumstances can be viewed as the immediate causes of relapse episodes. These hidden antecedents include lifestyle elements such as overall stress levels as well as psychological factors that could set up a relapse such as rationalization, denial, and a desire for instant pleasure, that is urges and cravings. By increasing a person's exposure to high-risk situations and diminishing motivation to resist drinking in these situations, these factors can make them more susceptible to relapsing. Initial lapses sometimes take place in high-risk situations that are absolutely unanticipated and for which the drinker is frequently unprepared. However, in relapse setups, it may also be feasible to spot a sequence of covert choices or decisions, each one appearing insignificant but adding up to a position where the danger is disproportionately high. These decisions are known as apparently irrelevant decisions because even while they may not be explicitly linked to relapse, they nevertheless contribute to the individual's approach to it. An instance of such an apparently irrelevant decision is when a non-drinker decides to buy a bottle of liquor just in case guests stop by. Such choices, according to Marlatt and Gordon, may allow a person to benefit from drinking right away while abdicating responsibility for the lapse. How could anyone expect me not to drink when there is a bottle of liquor in the house? Second is lifestyle factors. According to Marlatt and Gordon, the degree of balance between a person's life's perceived external responsibilities, that is shoulds, and internally gratifying or joyful activities, that is wants, is the covert antecedent most strongly connected to relapse risk. A person with a demanding life may feel stressed out all the time, which can lead to dangerous emotional states and situations. It can also increase a person's desire for pleasure and the justifications for indulging, such as, I owe myself a drink. The person may believe that drinking is the only way to experience pleasure or get relief from pain if there are no other enjoyable non-drinking activities available. Third is urges and cravings. The need for instant pleasure can come in many different ways, and for some people it manifests as a craving or impulse to consume alcohol. The relapse prevention model contends that while many researchers and clinicians view impulses and cravings as fundamentally physiological phenomena, they are actually triggered by psychological or environmental factors. The client's will to sustain abstinence may be undermined by persistent cravings as his or her need for instant fulfillment grows. This procedure can set up a relapse or make the client more susceptible to unexpected high-risk situations. Although the terms urge and cravings are often used interchangeably, they may well have different meanings. Thus, according to Marlatt and Gordon, craving is a subjective desire of experience the effects or consequences of engaging in a behavior such as drinking alcohol. An urge is described as a relatively quick impulse to do so. The same mechanisms, though, might mediate both drives and cravings. Two of these processes have been put forth. First, conditioning, activated by stimuli linked to pleasure in the past, and second, cognitive processes linked to pleasure in the future, that is, expectancies for the immediate pleasure effects of alcohol. That brings us to the end of today's lecture. Thanks for watching.